This program is made possible by a grant from the A.J. Fletcher Foundation. The North Carolina-based foundation supports social justice, public broadcasting, education, the arts, and human services throughout North Carolina. And the financial contributions of viewers like you.
There's a saying that without knowledge, the people perish. Education is key in that because it opens your eyes to a world that is beyond what is just in front of you.
As the oldest HBCU in the South, Shaw has led the way.
Shaw's mission is to educate, to inform, and to be a laboratory where solutions can be struggled with.
Education is an investment. It is not an expenditure. We spend money on things that depreciate. We invest in things that appreciate.
HBCUs have learned to do more with less, to make brick without straw.
These were not only academic institutions, they were freedom schools.
They provide the first truly interracial spaces in America.
Without this institution, without Henry Martin Tupper sitting in a room teaching freedmen the Bible, I would not have a college education.
This is Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. For the graduating class of 2016, today will be a celebration of their academic achievement that also marks the end of a year-long commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the school's founding by Baptist missionaries.
Smile.
For students and faculty, it is a time of excitement, pride, and quiet reflection.
My name is Dr. David C. Forbes Sr., and I am the interim dean of the Shaw University Divinity School. I grew up 4.5 blocks from this campus, and as a kid, my mother trusted me to walk over to the campus, so I was a campus brat. I applied to 2 schools my senior year in high school, Shaw and Yale, and I was a little intimidated by going north to a major white institution, so Shaw was a natural for me. In my view, Shaw University is a marvel. Henry Martin Tupper has robbed me of the ability to have bias against white people. He was a white man who was a Union chaplain who at the end of the war decided rather than to go to a promising future back in New England to stay and to teach newly freed slaves how to read and how to write.
Tupper is a Massachusetts native. He was educated at Amherst and also at Newton Theological Institute, and he had the desire to be an African missionary. The Civil War interrupted that great desire, and so he found himself looking for ways to give back in order to provide opportunities that were so desperately needed and wanted by the freedmen's community.
To oversee the transition from slavery to freedom, Congress establishes a new federal relief agency. Backed by Union troops, the Freedmen's Bureau provides humanitarian aid, legal protection, and educational opportunity for millions of newly freed slaves.
The situation following the Civil War would have been chaotic. The war would have turned the world upside down. No one yet knows what the rules will be, what the new society will be. The old society is definitely gone. And so it's a time of chaos, but also possibility. The big question becomes, how will we build a new society in which African Americans are not enslaved?
I'm Eric Falzer.
I'm Fritz Ballard, and we are the great-great-grandsons of Dr. Henry Martin and Sarah Tupper.
After the war, he wanted to be a missionary in Africa, and he went to the Baptist Home Mission, I believe it's called.
Yeah, American Baptist
Home Mission. And they said, we want you to go to Raleigh and gather the emancipated slaves and educate them. So he and Sarah got on a train and headed south.
So arriving in Raleigh in 1865, what he would have found is a host of newly freed people who saw education as a vehicle to personal and also racial advancement, and who were very much interested in accessing this great thing called education, which had been so long denied them as a consequence of slavery.
African Americans were denied knowledge. It was a crime back then to teach African Americans the art of reading and writing, because the slave owners believed that once Africans were educated and they know how to read and write, then obviously they know what their rights are, and it would be very difficult for them to control them.
Now emancipated, many families are hungry and living on the streets. So Tupper turns to the local Baptist church for support.
There was a movement at that time that was trying to get slaves or ex-slaves to go back to Africa. And what the General Baptist State Convention understood is that a lot of the ex-slaves were here to stay. And so the mission was outreach, making sure they had the basic necessities for survival, housing, jobs, food.
So they depended on the Freedmen's Bureau, which was set up through the government to help the former slaves. So Henry was able to secure clothing for them, and then he went about setting up services for them to get them into church and have that support system in place. So there was a great amount of need, and 5 months later he writes that there's still a great amount of need, but we've been able to make a dent.
People coming down from the north would not have been received very well by local white people. They would have been seen as interlopers, troublemakers, outsiders. They would not have been accepted into the society. They would have had to have forged their own way.
The Tuppers take a room in the Guyan Hotel, directly across from the state capitol, and in December began holding a small Bible study for freed men.
Most private historically black colleges and universities were founded either as teacher training or as preacher training. And so in the case of Tupper, Shaw began modestly in a hotel room as a theological class and steadily grew over time until it outgrew its modest accommodations, sending Tupper in search of a more ideal location, which he purchased with $500 that he had saved during his Union Army service. And Tupper, along with his handful of friends, and I would probably imagine some of his students, actually had to go out into the woods and get the wood with which they would construct the school.
The first building they built was essentially a log cabin that they worked from. They would go out into the country and they'd gather them together and try to help them. And then Sarah took it upon herself to see that the women were educated also. She was very adamant about that.
You can imagine that most of the students who came here were illiterate, could neither read nor write. This was an opportunity for the first time to be in a classroom and to have formal instruction.
In October 1866, the Raleigh Theological Institute opens its doors. 250 students attend day classes, and another 100 attend at night. But while blacks are eager for education, white resistance to Tupper's school is mounting.
Well, he was not accepted in regard to his arrival to Raleigh. There was great resistance to he and Sarah being here. How dare these Yankees come down here to help after the war? You know, you're not welcome. The story that's passed down through the family is that the Ku Klux Klan was coming to lynch him. So Henry sends Sarah out into the cornfields for protection. And he stays in the parlor to pray. And sure enough, the Klan shows up, and there was one particular Klansman who just didn't think it was quite right to hang a man of the cloth, and was able to talk the rest of them out of doing this, and he was spared. But the anger, the hatred was still there, and he had to fight that.
In his first 4 years, nearly 1,000 men, women, and children learned to read and interpret scripture at Tupper's small school. But by early 1870, it had outgrown its quarters again. Tupper offers $20,000 to purchase Peace Institute on the north edge of town. His bid is initially accepted, but when word spreads about his plan to expand his school for colored people, banks refuse to give him a mortgage, and the deal falls through. Undeterred, Tupper turns his attention to another nearby property.
Well, there certainly was a need to expand the school greater than just this little house that they were in and having Bible study. His eye was on the Behringer plantation. You know, here's this piece of ground right here in the heart of Raleigh, and it was well suited for his needs. But Henry wouldn't be able to buy it because of what he was doing. So he had to go through backdoor contacts and bring in people that, names that were not associated with his, to be able to purchase the property. These other people were buying the land and then deeding it over to Henry to build the school.
The estate is acquired for $13,000, with a $4,000 deposit from the Freedmen's Bureau. That summer, Tupper returned north to raise the balance from church groups and private donors.
He was able to engage his philanthropic and industrial friends in New England to support this institution. This is holy ground to me because of the investment that people made to see that this university would be able to grow and to develop and thrive.
Elijah Shaw, a wealthy textile merchant, contributes $5,000 to the growing school, and its first building is named in his honor. By 1871, Shaw Hall stands on the cornfields where earlier Tupper's family had hidden from lynch mobs, and the Raleigh Theological Institute is reborn as Shaw Collegiate Institute. Both Sarah and Henry Tupper believe that men and women should be educated together, just as they are reared in the family at home. So in 1873, St. Hall becomes the first building in the nation for the housing and the education of black women on a co-educational campus. Over time, enrollment in the school grew, and in the spring of 1875, Shaw Collegiate is officially incorporated as Shaw University, with its motto, Pro Christo et Humanitate, for Christ and humanity. From the outset, Tupper hoped to establish a medical school to train Christian physicians to meet the healthcare needs of blacks. And in 1881, that dream became reality when his brother-in-law, Judson Leonard, contributes $15,000 to build Shaw's first professional school, the Leonard School of Medicine.
It's significant that Shaw University began almost as a seminary to teach slaves how to read the Bible. But it's unbelievable what quantum growth Shaw University had under the leadership of Henry Martin and Sarah Tupper. Newly freed slaves began learning how to read in 1865. In 1883, the med school was established. I mean, here 18 years earlier, folks couldn't read, and now they are in the only four-year medical school in the United States.
The medical training is rigorous and thorough. Its aim to prepare Shaw's graduates to qualify to practice anywhere. All 6 men in the first graduating class passed their state medical board exams and set up practices throughout the South. To aid in the training, a 25-bed hospital is open to serve the black community.
Blacks in the South need medical care, and they don't have a lot of access to it. So in addition to the training of doctors, you have the actual act of performing medical service in a community that really desperately needs access to it.
Southern blacks also needed access to legal services. So in December 1888, Tupper opens the School of Law to train black attorneys. 2 years later, Tupper founds the Leonard School of Pharmacy to both serve the community and train students in the dispensing of medicine.
I believe that somehow he had intuitively a sense that while newly freed slaves were poor and ignorant, as in unlearned, that they had the capacity. Nowhere in the world that you would have had 3 professional schools develop that early on if he did not have a conviction that these newly freed slaves were capable.
This is basically the foundations of the building of the Black South and really of Black America. This is the training of Black America's first professional class, which began initially as teachers and as preachers and now is extending into other fields of endeavor.
The period of Shaw between 1865 and the 1890s was certainly what some have labeled the golden era of Shaw University. Henry Martin Tupper certainly was a visionary. He had the faith and the capacity and also the desire, along with his wife, Sarah Tupper, to come and to give his life for these freed slaves. He could have easily packed his bags and left, but he stayed with his plan, stayed with his vision. And I would imagine if Henry Martin Tupper were here today, he would be pleased with how far Shaw and the community has come. But like the visionary he was, he wouldn't be totally satisfied.
Henry Martin Tupper remained Shaw's president until his death in November 1893. At his request, he is buried on campus. The simple epitaph on his gravestone reads, "He counted not his life dear unto himself, that he might lift Godward his brother." For over 25 years, Tupper fought to fulfill his mission, but soon, his expansive vision for his beloved university will be challenged by the advancing threat of Jim Crow.
Shaw University was the first HBCU in the South. And out of Shaw, at least 5 other institutions of higher education were formed and assisted in their development by Shaw. So we looked upon Shaw as being the mother of HBCUs.
In less than 50 years after the Civil War, there are 800 African American schools built. Many of them would turn into colleges and universities. But the Northern commitment to equality, to advancement, to justice among African Americans did have limits, in part because Southern white culture is so vehement in its opposition and also violent in its opposition. So that when you have the South fighting back, the North basically says, that's not my fight.
In 1896, Southern resistance wins a major victory when a Louisiana law requiring separate railway cars for blacks and whites is upheld by the Supreme Court. The landmark decision in Plessy versus Ferguson legitimizes state laws that mandate segregation by race. Across the South, state legislatures quickly extend the doctrine to cover many areas of public life, and the Jim Crow system is born.
Plessy versus Ferguson institutionalizes separate but equal. And it signals that federal courts, who had been on the side of African Americans, are now turning away from that and won't uphold African American equality. What formal institutionalized legal segregation does by law rather than by choice is that it begins a whole process of the inequitable distribution of resources that continues over generations. So separate is not equal in the schools, in social services, in any kind of way.
When Plessy versus Ferguson came down, Shaw University, like many institutions that had seen golden years of establishing opportunities for free blacks, began to struggle with finances, it began to struggle with its identity, and it began to struggle with its very existence.
To make ends meet, Shaw's second president, Charles Meserve, faces the grim prospect of closing the professional schools, which are the pride of many, but operate at a loss. By 1914, low enrollment and high deficits forced the closure of the law school, and Leonard Medical School and its pharmacy are shuttered soon after. Like many historically black colleges and universities, Shaw struggles financially, limited both by her students' inability to pay tuition and the lack of a sufficient endowment to draw upon to cover shortfalls. Under Jim Crow, churches become even more essential to Shaw's survival. They hold Shaw Days to raise money and direct promising students into the school. In turn, Shaw trains teachers and pastors that preach about the importance of education in the face of social injustice.
Because the church was the centerpiece of the African American community at that time, the General Baptist State Convention established a committee that would make sure that funds were raised solely for the purpose of Shaw, and churches were focused on making sure that Shaw would remain in existence.
At that stage, 90% of all African Americans who pursued a college degree attended black colleges. Their role was really to develop the full individual and not just to provide academic preparation. These were not only academic institutions, they were freedom schools, and they were preparing their graduates to challenge the established order, to challenge the status quo.
My elementary school teachers and my parents taught us that you can be anything that you choose to be. We were not trained to the limitations that racism imposed. We were trained to dream, and my teachers used to say, get ready for the opportunity that is on the way.
Ella Baker is important to Shaw because she initiated change. She had the courage to lead, to sacrifice, and to make the example of what may be needed in order to move ahead.
Ella Baker is the kind of student that historically black colleges and universities produced and boast of. When Ella Baker graduates as valedictorian of her class in 1927, the administration is probably happy to see her go. She's shaken a lot of leaves here and ruffled a lot of feathers, in part because of her commitment to social justice.
As a girl, Ella Baker listened to her grandmother's stories about life as a slave in Warren County, North Carolina. And she witnessed firsthand the early struggle for black civil rights.
The family story had it that during election time, if white people tried to intimidate black voters. Ella Baker's grandfather was one of the men who would go and offer them protection. So she comes from a family that's proud, that's independent, who pass on this idea that you must improve yourself and then help to improve the community of which you are a part.
After graduating from Shaw, Baker worked as a journalist in Harlem before being hired by the NAACP as a field secretary, and quickly moves up the ranks to director of branches. She is an outspoken advocate for equality and pushes for more support of local activist campaigns.
She challenges the kind of autocratic leadership that is part and parcel of the NAACP. It's kind of patient preaching and practices. She really wants to see a diversity of its membership. She wants it to move out of its middle class box and to embrace the working class and kind of bring them into the fold.
On December 1st, 1955, the modern civil rights movement begins, when Rosa Parks refuses to surrender her seat to a white man on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Her arrest sparks a 13-month mass protest that ends with the Supreme Court ruling that segregation on public buses is unconstitutional. Following the success of the bus boycott, church ministers from across the South formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to coordinate local protest groups and nonviolent resistance. Led by Martin Luther King, the SCLC becomes a new base for political social action and drafts Ella Baker to organize its efforts. But Baker favors a broad, grassroots approach over King's top-down, charismatic leadership.
I think my favorite quote by Ella Baker is, "Strong people don't need strong leaders. They need training in how to become leaders themselves." On February 1st, 1960, the sit-ins begin in Greensboro, North Carolina. And Ella Baker recognizes that this is a new phase of activism.
Within weeks, students at other HBCUs across the South mount similar protests.
The beginning of 1960 was a breath of fresh air for her. It was the very thing that she'd been looking for, the opportunity that she'd been waiting on, and she was able to convince the SCLC to convene a meeting of those student activists at her alma mater. Undoubtedly, in the back of her mind, when she returned home to Shaw, it must have been a kind of, "I told you so."
I was literally a son of Ella Baker. I met her in 1960 when SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was established on this campus. She was a wise lady.
Now, the NAACP and the SCLC had an ulterior motive in mind. They had intended to bring these students into their folds, and they in fact were competing to see who among them could get as many students as quickly as possible. And it was in fact Ella Baker that said, "Oh no, we want them to remain independent."
Dr. Martin Luther King wanted the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to be under the parentage of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She said, "No way. Old folks haven't made any changes, so don't stop young folks from making changes." So SNCC remained independent throughout those years. I had heard all of my life, prepare for the opportunities that are coming. That was one of the opportunities that came. We went monthly down to Atlanta, Georgia, to Morehouse College to sit with Dr. King and Ella Baker and other members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference who supported us.
So you had a bunch of personalities coming together to convene to centralize a fairly decentralized movement. There was one faction who wanted to concentrate on voter registration and another who wanted to concentrate on direct action protests. And it was in fact Ella Baker who negotiated this kind of mutuality, that the organization could have these two foci and they didn't have to be mutually exclusive.
I was one of the major organizers of the sit-ins. The sit-ins were directed at variety stores that would allow us to shop, but we could not sit down at the lunch counters. After A&T had set in at Woolworth's in Greensboro, we organized ourselves a couple of weeks later, and we sat in at Woolworth's in Cameron Village. I was the first to be arrested. The reason that we could be a potent weapon is that we didn't have jobs. If our parents had gotten out and demonstrated, the economic order and political order would have decimated them. When we were demonstrating, we were not allowed students who had high-profile parents, teachers, and postal workers, we would not allow them because we didn't want to take a chance that their picture would be taken and it would be in the paper and their parents would be fired. My father was a minister. They couldn't fire him.
Those young men and women who came to create the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee fanned out throughout the South, put their lives on the line, and worked arm in arm with other civil rights organizations to tear down the walls of segregation and help build the foundation for a nation that provides social justice for all, yet to be achieved but fought for by students and faculty and administrators alike.
With the coming of student activists, you see that there is a very consistent and persistent effort to dismantle segregation through direct action, nonviolent protests. And that had been unheard of until that time. And that is in part why student activists from black colleges were so unique and black colleges were so special, because they were arguably at the nexus of this modern civil rights movement in a way in which even the black church was not.
The impact of that is, had there not been the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, there would not have been the Civil Rights Act of 1964 signed by President Lyndon Johnson. No SNCC, no Civil Rights Act, no Voting Rights Act, no Obama. It's just as clear as anything. So what we did as young college students was revolutionary in changing the condition of things in this nation.
Throughout its history, Shaw University has faced many challenges and been shaped and reshaped by its leaders, both to ensure its survival and to meet the needs of its students. During the turbulent 1960s, Shaw is transformed by one of her own.
I was here in the 60s when Dr. James Cheek became president, and I saw this person with charisma, with leadership to the hilt. He had a very good relationship with students, very excellent relationship with his staff and faculty, and it just looked like a new day.
As a student at Shaw, Cheek had agitated for change, and his vision for the school attracts much needed financial support. He retires owed debt and implements the Shaw Plan of Education, which revamps the curriculum while raising academic standards and providing remedial support for students with deficiencies. He also launches a $10 million building campaign to restore and expand the campus. It's an ambitious period of growth and renewal. During his 5-year tenure, enrollment doubles, and Shaw's operating budget increases from $700,000 to nearly $6 million a year. But Dr. Cheek's departure for Howard University leaves his alma mater saddled with debt that future presidents will contend with for years. To make matters worse, as Shaw struggles to balance its books, desegregation in higher education is driving a decline in enrollment at HBCUs. The drop in student revenue hits black colleges hard, as many rely more heavily on tuition than majority schools with better public funding.
Historically, black colleges, whether they've been public or private, they've always been under-resourced